we will have a little introduction of the concept of the talent attraction and retention challenges and the PwC True Choice Preference Analytics. We're going to get into some details, some concept backgrounds, but the most important will be the next 2 points when we will just provide you live demonstration of the tools that we are using and of course of live examples that we have done and we do for clients and for ourselves as well, because it's very important that we use the same tool for some PwC countries as well to understand the preferences of our employees. And at the end, as usually, you will have a sneak preview from the hosts on the next session. So, as Sarah mentioned, last week when we had our presentation on the CEO survey that we do every year globally, it's still a really hot topic for each CEOs and even HR top managers, the talent retention and attraction and the challenges regarding to that. Why? Because what we see is the availability of capable talents and capable people in all over Europe or globally is still an issue. So whenever we start talking about it, we end up in the questions of attraction, how to get the best people from the market. We end up in the questions of retention, satisfaction, employee experience. Then we go and end up with effective benefit systems, employee value proposition, how to treat and how to attract different generations like millennials. So all in all these challenges are in front of us. And today, with the PwC True Choice solution, what we will show you a specific approach when we focus on these challenges from a data perspective and a data-driven, fact-based solution. We try to get the most specific information out of these challenges or meet these challenges when you start working on the market. So first of all, I think Sev will tell you a couple of words of the background of the whole application.
Interestingly, when we talk to clients about that, what we're seeing in the HR world are the same trends we've seen for many years in the consumer world, mainly that people are becoming increasingly heterogeneous, meaning everybody is different from each other, and preferences are changing very rapidly over time. So it's actually a very fitting solution to use a marketing-based technology like True Choice in an HR environment. And so what we have done, we'll show you some of the examples today, is build a platform that doesn't replace your current HR system, but it superpowers them by really feeding insights into your decision processes that help you to very directly and very measurably improve your return on the HR investment. The applications that have been built by PwC around the True Choice platform are very broad. So this is not a shrink-wrap standardized package, but it's really a platform that's customized in terms of look and feel, content analytics integration for every single client application. And the big topics, of course, you see here. We do a lot of work in the rewards environment where the technology is used to understand how can we better align what and how we pay our people with what they value. We do quite a bit of work in what we call talent analytics, especially millennials are looking at their workplace differently. They value training, development, work-life balance factors very differently than the prior generations, and the tool works very well in this concept. We do quite a bit of what we call life cycle work, where the tools are used to support recruiting, lead generation, helping people understand why is joining this company actually the right thing for me, as well as using it internally for retention, internal mobility, and similar challenges. One of the big trends we've seen over the past probably 2 years is that companies are looking for quantitative hard euro, Swiss franc data on soft factors. So really understand how can we directly impact the topics like engagement, culture, branding, diversity. So the whole soft factor world is becoming increasingly important, and people are valuing the opportunity to measure that and make fact-based decisions. And a little bit above the scope of what we're doing today, but we have built in the PwC world quite a few targeted solutions to address topics like expats or address topics like how can we recruit and retain insurance agents, wealth managers, brokers, and so on, where the topic is about a very specific part of my employee population.
And as you see that in the middle, there's total employee value. So the most important for us to understand what is valuable to the employees, what makes them to choose your company, and what makes them pay.
And the nice thing about total employee value is it goes both ways. So it's about optimizing the value that the employee gets out of their relationship with the employer, but the other way around, also optimizing the value the employee creates for the employer. And I think that's a very good way of thinking about HR preference analytics and preference measurement.
So if thanks, Seb. So if I just kind of listen to what you're saying, I suppose when I started in HR more than sort of 20 years ago, the way that, organizations were classically measuring, employee satisfaction surveys, they were, you were doing basic surveying techniques, satisfaction with reward surveys. Is this the kind of replacement of that as a method for engaging with employees about what's important to them?
I think it's a totally different and new way of learning about the employee experience. And as a result, obviously, it does replace a lot of the old technologies on the satisfaction side. What TrueChoice really does here is we measure very precisely how individuals make decisions. So understand what their decision drivers are, what their preferences are, what do they value. And what's important is data that is available at the individual level. It's very predictive and very actionable and can be, of course, tied to other KPIs like satisfaction, engagement, and retention, and makes those decisions a lot more actionable and fact-based. So I wouldn't say it's a direct replacement. I think it's a better new way to learn about how employees make decisions, how they tick. And as a result, a lot of the traditional tools tend to become less important or tend to fall away.
Yeah, makes sense. And just who's using this?
So good question, actually. So TrueChoice originally, just to be completely frank, was founded as a marketing technology. So we originally used this for consumers until a lot of our clients came to us and said, oh, this is really good. It works for customers, for companies like Dell or Intel or Cisco to help you buy a computer. Or we use this for big car companies like Ford or Volkswagen, for example. And a lot of the CEOs of our marketing clients came to us and said, oh my God, we should do the same thing in human resources and take a marketing approach to HR. And so we started doing this about 5 years ago. And in the last 5 years, we've deployed TrueChoice with roughly about 20 million employees, 40% of those in the US, 40% in Europe, about 20% in Asia. Without dropping too many names, but we've done this for a good chunk of the global Fortune 1000 in pretty much all industries, but a lot of work in technology, financial services. We've done this for quite a few large governments. So the US government, for instance, used this to completely revamp the compensation and reward system of the US Army. Last year, the Ministry of Defense in the UK used TrueChoice to A, optimize their compensation reward system, and B, create a completely new model of flexible employment schemes where they're changing the kind of work-life balance offerings that the British Army is offering to their people. We've done this in Australia with the Australian Department of Defense, and with a lot of the leaders in the overall healthcare world, the companies like Cisco, UBS, and so on, have been using TrueChoice in the past. And importantly, I always like to mention that PwC is using it very actively internally. So we've used this in the US to help PwC in America with retention. We've used this in Europe. And so PwC is clearly drinking their own Kool-Aid. It's always nice to see.
Thank you very much for this introduction and for the explanation on where it has been already used. I think it's impressive to hear that from you. Can you tell us a bit, because I'm wondering, coming from this data analytics background, how does it work? What makes your survey technique so different compared to the more traditional survey techniques?
If you go back to the prior slide, please. So the notion is very simple. So TrueChoice is based on several hundred patented algorithms that are measuring in real time how individual makes decisions. So traditionally, you would ask a lot of questions, throw those questions in some data system, a regression model, what it might be, and analyze it. Your results would be aggregate level results, and you would only get one data point, if you want, out of an individual employee. TrueChoice is different. We have these patented algorithms that allow us to really understand how people make decisions, understand their preference, but also understand the underlying value, which is very important in HR. You'll see it in detail. We've got a few nice demonstrations for you, where certain things are very important to employees, but if you make a change to it, it doesn't really move the needle. And so what's really different about TrueChoice is that we have very rich individual level insights that we can generate that make a lot of the HR decisions more actionable on the one hand. But more importantly, what we have seen is, that you see this in the bottom of the slide, we have three stakeholders. The one stakeholder is the employee, and TrueChoice, having a consumeristic kind of background, is creating a very pleasant, very engaging, very educational employee experience. And you'll see this in just a second when we go through the demo. So this is not a survey, but it's really a personalized dialogue or decision support tool that employees enjoy. And you'll be surprised. We just did this for about 7,000 employees last week with PwC in the US. And the completion rate was 97%. So that's 97% without incentive. And I hate to say, but that actually beat the completion rate of PwC Europe, which only was 96%. So the notion is the employee experience is at the core of what we do, and that's a big differentiator. The data is available at the individual level. Even if you don't use it at the individual level, we have the ability to personalize offers, personalize value messaging, and taking a bottom-up approach is, of course, a lot more precise than a top-down approach, which would be a traditional way of doing these. And from a company perspective, you really get a thing on the pulse of your market in terms of having real-time insights for design, for planning, cost performance optimization, very rich, very reliable insights. And from our perspective, because we are delivering this as a managed service or software as a service, what is key is that it's always tied to some outcome for you. Meaning, where we've done this, we've seen somewhere between 1,500 and 4,000 or 5,000 euros in instantaneous annual cost savings per employee per year, while actually maintaining and sometimes even increasing these KPIs we mentioned before, like satisfaction, engagement, and retention. And that's really the core of TrueChoice, that it leads to a measurable outcome. And that actually is a nice segue into the next slide. What you see on the left-hand side is what I'm currently offering to an employee in yellow. In red and green, you see what this person actually values, meaning in red, we have a lot of areas where we're throwing money out the window. So imagine I offer an employee life insurance. Life insurance costs 1,000 francs to provide, but the employee only values that at 600 francs. So we're throwing 400 francs out the window that we could have actually reinvested, at least some of it, into what you really value, which is a nicer company car. So the theme behind TrueChoice is to understand how individuals make decisions so we can better align what and how we offer to what people value. And that will then directly lead to what you see on the right-hand side, which is very measurable savings from optimized programs and incentives, higher retention, engagement, productivity, and really optimizing the entire employee life cycle. So very measurable hard and soft ROI. Now, what you see here is obviously a conceptual consulting slide. The good news is we can do this live, and that's what you see here. Here's an example of a real client, a very complex employee experience consisting of a lot of different factors relating to rewards, benefits, other compensation components, stock options, training development, work-life balance, and so on. And what you can see is that for every individual employee, we see exactly where do we get a positive versus negative return. So for every single factor, we see does it cost us more than the employee values it, or does it cost us less than the employee values it? And that's a very actionable and very pragmatic way to do the alignment we saw conceptually on the prior slide.
And I think it's pretty important that when you look at this slide, which is an example from a dashboard, then you can measure the positive return or the negative return, not only on those elements of the value proposition that you're offering now, but you're able to measure something that you're about to introduce. So that's also something that supports your decision that before you introduce anything that is something that is generating value to the employees, you can measure, you can test if it really brings the real result or not. And these days, when companies are trying to find out new ways of attracting and retaining people, this is also something that spares energy and money not to introduce something that is not valuable to the people without having a kind of an analysis.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, right? So it's a little bit chicken and egg. So you get this. So a lot of organizations still have classic, fairly rigid kind of offerings around working time, around annual leave. You know, if you're at this particular grade, you're entitled to, for example, 25 days vacation. What's your experience with organizations who've got that sort of rigidity built in terms of how they use a tool like this and how they then create that agility in what they're offering? Because really that's where the rubber hits the road, where you have to actually change your policies, you have to change how you do it. What's your experience there?
Sarah, what I see is that it's getting more and more a must for a company. So getting into a flexible benefit system and flexible benefit system offerings is the only way how the attraction and the retention challenges can be met. What I see in many companies that they are blaming the situation that not enough talent, it's difficult to attract them, but they're using the same techniques as they did 10 years before. So if somebody is not changing, if somebody is not going into the flexibility options, then I think the war for talent is lost. So I think, but that will be one of the outcomes and the examples that we are going to show in the demo. That is flexibility direction. I think this is one of the most important outcomes.
So I can give you one quick example, by the way. So we see two themes in clients usually. The one theme where clients say everything is on the table. You can basically change everything, and we see other clients that say, well, there are things that we don't want to change at this point. We've done it for a very long time. Let's only focus on stuff that we can actually influence. For instance, when we do this for government clients, obviously every time you change reward systems for your government employees, that requires an act of parliament. So that's a long-term process. So what that means is that we are in a situation where we're going out and potentially leaving all of the basic rewards components the same, but then at the same time, we would then look at factors like training and development, some additional work-life balance components, diversity factors, career trajectory, things that can actually be changed and can be updated. And then we focus on those components. And in most cases, those clients will come back a couple of months later and say, great, now we're ready to actually throw everything in and do an even more comprehensive assessment. So that's the beauty of the True Choice tool, that it's customized for every client. And depending on how far you want to lean out the window, the PwC team will customize the content accordingly and can also then change it over time.
Yeah, and I think we have to show how it works.
Yes, let's do that. So quick overview, True Choice is delivered as a customized software as a service. I don't want to get into any technical details, but obviously we've done this for a lot of big banks, a lot of healthcare companies, a lot of European governments. So we are fully vetted from a data security and data privacy point of view. Happy to provide more details on that. The entire platform is customized for every single client by PwC in terms of the look and feel, the content, the analytics that are being used, the different integration points. The employee usually interacts with True Choice wherever they have access to the internet. That can be on a laptop, that can be on a smartphone, very, very flexible. And the tool usually requires somewhere between 5 and 8, maximum 10 minutes from an employee. So it's a much faster experience than, for instance, a traditional survey. All of the content is completely personalized for the individual. And as the person is using the tool, data goes back and forth in real time between the front end and the back end. We're measuring her preferences, but we also personalizing the content that she sees. Conventional cost data, usage data, and so on can be integrated into the system, but that's not a requirement. And then the technology measures a whole slew of different metrics in real time: preferences, satisfaction, perceived value, different expectations. And part of the patented algorithms is not just the ability to measure all of these metrics, but also to validate the information. So we end up with a very robust, very predictive individual level preference profile that then allows us to show you what would be an optimized offer for an individual employee, and obviously any aggregated version of that. And at the same time, at the end of the exercise, the employee doesn't just get a thank you, goodbye, but they get real-time feedback, a personalized message. Here is why working at PwC is a great idea, and here are some of the things that we already are doing that resonate with you. So it's not 10 or 15 minutes of an employee's time. It's really a valuable dialogue where people get a lot of information, education out of it.
Yeah, and I think
and just there's a question I see on the chat here, which is, do you need to integrate this with your core HRIS system, or is it standalone?
So it's a standalone solution. It can be integrated with HRS systems, but that's optional. Depends on what you would like to do. If you want to integrate, we do have all of the standard web interfaces available, so it's not very hard. And one of the clients, by the way, where PwC has implemented True Choice on a global scale, and they've been running it now for 3 years in a row, is actually Workday, just as an FYI.
Right. Thank you, Steph. There is another question coming in. It's about this, personalization of the content that you show in the tool. Does that also, for example, mean that the CEO gets, let's say, other values of the offered benefits showed than a junior who just worked 1 year for the company?
So there's two components to personalization. The one component to personalization is the underlying variables that we're measuring. Yeah, so that obviously there's a different salary range for a senior person versus a junior person and so on. So we can customize that part of the setup. But then also the messaging that the individual gets, what's important to whom and how, will be based on individual preferences, not just on their demographic data, but really on their individual preferences. So when we talk about personalization, we mean both.
Okay, sounds good.
Right, then I think it's time to have the demonstration shortly, because maybe many people are interested how we can reach the 98% rate. So just a few pictures first, and then I will go to a live demo. As Sev mentioned, the front-end application is a multi-platform compatible application. So it's important then when we get information from the employees, they can have an easy access to in any device to the application. So PC, tablet, smartphone, with any systems can be done. And it's important that the application itself is always designed to spend not more than 15-20 minutes by each and every individual with getting many information. But as you will see that all the content and also the design is customized just to make it a very good, let's say, experience to use it. So you see some illustrations here. And I think what is important about the front end, as I mentioned, this is the employee experience, what they see. That personalized content for every respondent, this has been mentioned already. Dynamic questions, you will see that we use very nice graphical solutions of getting the information from the employees. It's very important that the application cannot be gamed. So it's pretty important that a lot of features of the application helps to, let's say, force finally decisions from the employees about preferences. And all the results that are coming out of this is going into the dashboard and the database that is going to come in the second part of the demonstration. So these are just some PwC examples. On the left-hand side, you see a PC or tablet solution. On the right-hand side, you see a phone solution. I think what is important here, this is just a picture, but in a minute I will show you the demonstration, that this is what people see. So they just have to use these bars, push up and down, and make easy selections and easy preferences between different options. This page, yeah?
Just a quick notion. So what we've done is this is a very similar interface we would use in a marketing and sales environment as well. And it basically mimics the conversation you would have with a good friend or a trusted advisor. So it follows a process that we call learn, compare, decide. So you're right now in the learn phase where we show you different aspects of the offering, and you, in a very easy way, tell us, oh yeah, I like this a little bit more than that, and learn about the different options and explicate your preferences. Yeah. We tend to do relatively simple designs these days. So you see a lot of sliders, mostly because pretty much every client wants to work this on, have this on so many different devices that it's just easier to do it that way. But we also have a lot of very playful and very gamified application if that is something that you would prefer. And then as Robbie starts to click through this, you'll see in just a moment, you come to the compare stage now, where you compare different aspects to each other. Then you come to a few personalized trade-offs before the tool really comes back to you and says, great, I get it. Here's what you've been telling us. You see an overview of your preferences on the right-hand side, and you also see a confirmation of your preferences and a comparison relative to other employees in your firm. But importantly, all of the messaging you see on the page is completely driven by you and your preferences. So this could be even a tool set that explains and helps you make decisions on different HR programs or different job choices. So it's very flexible from that perspective.
Yeah. And I suppose what I was... Yeah, so just a second, Robert. What I was interested there in terms of the preferences that were coming up, it was talking about the type of work that people were doing. They're expressing that as a preference, talking about the work environment, so the physical environment as well. So you could sort of look at this and sort of some of these examples and go, well, it's just about reward or compensation, but actually it's much broader than that, isn't it?
Yes, that's why I'm going to show you here, because this is the live demo, and the good news that I just clicked on the link, which is included in the presentation. So when somebody is reviewing back the record, the link is live. So this open demo can be reached by anybody if you want to play around. So just quickly how it goes. And as you mentioned, Sarah, that there are different aspects. For example, here on the specific page, we are asking question about how important are each of these learning and development opportunities are for you. So people can just use these bars up and down. And I think one of the best features is you can see some info icons here. If you click on that, you get a little explanation of the element that we asked the question about or the preference about, why it is important. It's always a big question that people sometimes don't even know what they receive from the company. So if you use the application, it's also a side effect to have a recommunication of the current offerings or benefit offerings or anything that is valuable. And people just can have a recall of, oh my God, I got so many things. But also in the list, you can have some features that you are not offering at the moment. You can have it. For example, next question that people can have their preferences about how many days of working from home is preferred by them. If I want to be 2 days a week preference, I will just adjust it here, or 3. So it's my preference, it's my decision. Also, you mentioned the vacation days. For the younger generation, it could be important to choose additional vacation days instead of something else. So if somebody is ready to go to festivals in the summer, then they would just say 3 additional days, or even 5 additional days, or 6. Always it's a decision of the company. What the questions are, what the elements are, what the attributes are. That's the part of the preparation phase when we just put all the data into the system. Also,
what you see specifically is customized based on your preferences, so we wouldn't mismanage expectations.
Yeah. So I'm just getting a little bit quickly around that. For example, life insurance, vision insurance, because I have glasses, I like to eat a lot, so dental insurance and life insurance, I want to stay alive. So I think it really depends on what you prefer. And just going a little bit quickly, and as I mentioned that you will have the chance to do it at home, we can ask the preference about the bonus percentage. If somebody is preferring, let's say, more performance-related pay or less performance-related pay, that's also possible to highlight. And sometimes we ask questions about the base pay increase. 5% is preferred, 0% is not preferred. All in all, in the other and second part of the application, after the absolute preferences, you have to just set your relative preferences. Try to make it quick, just to have some results. And as we mentioned and we showed in the pictures, there is a third part of the application when you have some forced choices. And what is really important, that these questions in the third section are based on the answers and preferences from the first two questions.
And they're separated by what's really possible, so we wouldn't mismanage expectations. So you see the person here gets this very interesting offer. I guess we get it. You really would like to go to conferences, but then we have to cap your bonus opportunity at 10%. And so you see how the tool, everybody, that's one of the problems of traditional employee tools. Everybody wants everything, yeah, but realistically, that's not possible. And so TrueChoice does a very nice job now helping people through those decision scenarios, and that's exactly what's happening here.
Yeah, so here I think it's a clear trade-off that I would rather choose job rotation and the 20% bonus instead of the other one. And the last question, the TrueChoice solution offers you to ask some other inputs from your employees as well. I'm just running through on that because I just want to show you the final page, which is the feedback.
Yeah, and just as a side note, there's anything else, satisfaction, competitive perception, any engagement, anything else you would want to ask can be asked inside of the TrueChoice tool as well, and then can be linked back to the preference analytics, which is a very compelling side effect.
Yeah, but here, and this is what the final page of the employee experience, if I just had this application, then it seems that vacation is the most important for me. After that, learning and development. With the light blue lines, you can also include some peer groups if you want, but it's also something that you can customize. However, this is what we just showed you in a couple of minutes, is the front-end application, and this is what employees see. And I just close it back.
And just as a side note, all of the content you saw on the bottom is all, again, personalized messaging, really dependent on your individual preferences. So it's a complete personalized communication tool. And one question we get a lot from clients is, how important are personalized rewards, for instance, because they're still fairly hard to do, and the infrastructure is not available in most firms. And the answer in most cases is that while personalized rewards are interesting, what's actually more important is personalized rewards messaging. That even though Robbie and I might get the same thing, highlighting different aspects, using a different argument for Robbie versus me, actually creates, at a very low cost, very significant value.
Yes, and I think it's time to turn on the database and the dashboard, because all in all, what we have shown to you is how to get the preference data from the employees. And now I think in the last couple of minutes or the next 15 minutes, we have to show what is happening with that. I think Sev has.
Yeah, and Sev, I think that last point you mentioned is a really, really important one. That this could lead you to that sort of conclusion that you need to deliver personalised reward for your employees, but actually there are other options, and there are grayscales in terms of how you tailor without having to go to that complexity of having individual rewards. Can you maybe just talk a little bit about how organisations have therefore managed to kind of process this information and actually change how they deliver that offering into their organisations?
So there's a lot of different ways to use the insights. The biggest theme that we're seeing from clients is that the TrueChoice data gives us a fact base to really make decisions, to make changes to our HR offering, because we can quantify and justify those decisions with outcomes. Some of the things that are very, very common is that companies are using this to redesign their reward systems, understand how heterogeneous are my employees. Do I need 2 or 3 or 4 different offers or bundles? How do I message this to people? And then more importantly also, how do I spend my money in a way that I'm getting the biggest bang for the buck? And so what we have seen on average is that when we do this in Western Europe, there are somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 euros or Swiss francs in a value gap that the company can then look at reinvesting. Maybe some of that can be saved, some of it can be reinvested, so we can increase the productivity and retention of high-value employees or people that are hard to recruit. So it really depends on what is the pain point for every specific company. But I think in general, the 2 big themes we're seeing is the insights are used to become more targeted in our HR initiatives, and they're used to really do things much more from a cost and value optimization point of view than in analytic blind flight, how a lot of work has been done in the past. And then the third part is really it helps us change, because we do see that change is a positive thing. And just a side note, we do a lot of work in Europe with companies that have work councils or trade unions. And what we've actually seen is that once we share some of the data with a trade union, they have a mandate to do the best possible for their members, and having a quantitative argument to see and say, look, we are looking to make this change because it's actually something that creates more value for your employees, even though it might be at a lower cost, is a very powerful argument. And we've seen that as a good tool, even to use in the context of collective bargaining.
And I'd just like to confirm this. So including unions, even from the beginning of developing such an application, has absolutely a commitment from their side when it changes. Because I think it's just obvious that all the proposed changes in the benefit system or in the value proposition are based on the preferences of the employees. So it's coming from them.
So from my perspective, the $1 million slide is what you see here. So the theme behind TrueChoice is that the deliverable really is a real-time live decision platform that's very easy to use, that you can have on your iPad. We have many of our clients that take those into board meetings and model questions that might pop up in real time. And from my perspective, the key learning is that what the PwC TrueChoice offer can do is measure preferences, which is what you see on top in dark green, and at the same time understand what's the perceived value willingness to pay, which is what you see in the bottom in light green. And that's something that's very unique, because there's no other tool out there that can do this properly. Understand that there are hygiene factors and components that my employees value and that they say is really important, but from a monetary value point of view, it actually is a very different picture. And understanding both concepts, perceived value as well as preference, and understand their separate KPIs, if you want, is really what makes this a very actionable and a very predictive solution. We don't want to go into too much detail on the back end. We have at the moment over 100 different metrics that are available, anything from preferences, buyer value, expectation analysis. We have a very powerful segmentation tool. We can look at value gaps. But let me show you a couple of these actually in real time and live in a dashboard. So what you see here is a real application, a real dashboard. And so obviously you have all of the tools that you would expect in a technology application, performance measurement, who's using the tool, where are they using the tool. And just so you see here, this is a real client. And in this case, their overall completion rate of people who started the tool was 96%. And more importantly, the response rate was 91%. And then you see here, they're talking about response rate and response rate reliable. TrueChoice has a patented tool set built in that allows us to predict how reliable and how predictive an individual profile is. And so if somebody is trying to game the system, we can very quickly see that. So you always can rely on very high quality data. From a usage point of view, even though the tool only takes a few minutes, we can go very deep, understand all of the different aspects of an offering, and we can see the data in terms of preferences, importance in real time. So I can literally go in here now and say, well, show me people that have been with the company for less than a year, yeah, and have a certain performance rating, and pretty much any subsegment you can identify and drill down in real time and understand what their preferences and what their importances are. We have a built-in segmentation system that tells me exactly how are the different cohorts of people within my organization different from each other. We can, of course, understand, which is probably the most important factor, perceived value relative to actual cost, which is what you see here. And that allows us now to define what we saw in the prior slide, what I call a little tongue-in-cheek, the money down the drain index. So the ability to really see for every single aspect of my offering, where do I get a positive versus negative return? And as we mentioned before, you can now see this information with respect to every subsegment of your employees. Here I'm looking just at different job descriptions as an example, and the tool will instantaneously recalculate. But you do see on top, in this case, the annual money down the drain, so the optimization potential is actually about $6,000 per employee, and the numbers are very similar when we do this in Switzerland or in Germany or Austria. So it is about within that realm. What we have seen as a very important learning in a more complex, more heterogeneous world is that TrueChoice can also measure how heterogeneous are my employees. Do I need to offer 2 packages or 5 packages? And so what would be an optimal offering complexity? So TrueChoice has all of these things built into the system. We understand, obviously, the elasticity of different benefits. We can link this to engagement. We have the ability to think about any aspect of the underlying drivers of my HR program in terms of what you see here, for instance, wellness. What is it that people prefer? What is the perceived value of those factors? And then how does this link very directly into the KPIs we're interested in, such as engagement? Yeah? We can also look at that from a competitive perspective. So it's not just important how happy my people are, but it's also important what they think they would get on the other side of the fence. And so there's several hundred different types of analyses that PwC will tailor based on the insights that you're looking to get. So that was a little bit of an overview in terms of the front-end tool and the front-end analytics. In addition to that, obviously, everybody who has access to insights like this wants to understand what's the so what. So how does this now directly impact the decision I'm making today? And so here is an interesting example of one of the optimization tools that you get as part of the offering. So in this case, you see a couple million different rewards offerings that are defined based on the variables that you see on the right-hand side. And in this case, imagine I'm an HRD, and I'm looking for this cohort of people to decrease my total cost by 4 million. But I only want to do this if at least 90% of my employees prefer this over what I currently offer. And more importantly, I'm interested to understand what is the impact now on engagement. And the TrueChoice tool will allow us now
I think we have lost Sev.
We have lost Sev. But Robert, you're still there, are you?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, I had, there was just a couple of kind of questions that were coming through, so just more in terms of the tool. How often would you, I mean, this is clearly a huge amount of data that you're getting from employees, typically with clients. How often are they actually running this with their employees?
My experience so far is that every other year is usually what they choose, because imagine that you measure the preferences and you start implementing the outcomes. So whenever you start implementing anything in your value proposition in the outcomes, then it has a lead time to understand the, let's say, the value and to understand the impact. So what we usually see is do it, implement changes, let's say, upgrade your value proposition, and then to repeat it in the second year to measure back, because I think in 2 years, preferences can change. Life is going so fast. These are changing so fast. So I think it can be easily tracked in about 2 years.
Yeah, it's interesting. And for organizations, so if I'm looking at this and I lead a global organization with people across multiple countries, I'm guessing, do I need to configure this differently for those employees in different countries, or will one setup do for all of my employees?
No, I think if you are, the question is, if I understand clearly, if you have a multi-country operation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think preferences can be different from country to country. So as Seb mentioned, that if you have some generic elements of your value proposition that is the same in every country, of course you can use it. But I think, and my experience is that preferences are different, or preferences can be different. Even value propositions can be different. So whenever we have done it for a multinational company in many countries, we had some common grounds, same value proposition elements that we measured in every country, but of course we had some country-specific elements. That can come from the local benefit system, the local customs, the local preferences, but all in all, whenever you would like to have a solution that is focusing on how to get the most out of this, then you have to focus on specifically on one organization.
Yeah, and is it available in different, something is software as a service, so can I configure it so French, German, Italian for other countries?
We've done it in 46 languages. Yes. So yeah, the answer is yes.
Seb is back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Seb, hi.
Well, whenever technology companies meet, something is bound to happen. So that's
yeah, that's always a bit of a challenge, but we've only got a few minutes left. But I think we have got the incredible complexity of the reports and the insights. So I mean, I suppose it's sort of, if I'm sitting here as someone, you know, as an HRD, I'm kind of going, oh my goodness, how do I manage and really internalize within my function this level of insight and data? What's your experience there? You know, how do organizations, and in particular the HR functions, really cope with this amount of data and insight that maybe they've, just never had before?
And maybe in addition to that, also another question is popping up right now. It's asking about it's really nice that you ask employees to contribute and show them what's important to them. But if you don't act on that, it might be even dangerous, because you give them a kind of expectation. If you don't follow up, they might even be dissatisfied. So how do we make sure that we really use the data?
Yeah, but reflecting on the last one, it's the same with any other interactions. I'm sorry. So it's not about PwC True Choice. So if you measure something and if you are asking let's say the opinion of your employees, then you should be ready to act upon that. Otherwise, it will not be credible. So I think don't start it if you are not ready to act. So I think on one hand, it's pretty critical. On the other hand, I think the question that you raised is that we have to start from the big picture, because yes, usually when the data flow is coming, then I think people are ready to dig into it for 3 nights and 3 days. But we have to start from the big picture. And the database and the dashboard is built up that there are some generic big picture data outcomes. And whenever you start testing the potential decision points, Then the other elements of the dashboard are supporting you in going to details and granulating down into very small details just to confirm your decision. So there is a step-by-step approach how to come from the big, let's say, picture to end up in a decision. I think all in all, that's the most important, that based on this, you can go to your boardroom and offer a decision or just provide a material that the decision can be done easily by financial and specific data-driven attributes.
Yeah, it does make me smile a bit. I do remember back sort of, 20 years ago, putting global reward packages together and sort of spending time in a conference room, like, shaking our heads over, plus or minus an extra couple of days vacation. And, it's just really come such a long way in terms of really, instead of relying on instinct or experience, really actually kind of directly connecting and getting into the data. I suppose maybe a question for you, Sev. I mean, you said right at the start that 20 million employees have now been surveyed. Do we have insight? Are there any sort of things that, when we look across that larger data set, are there any sort of really key messages that have come up that you would say are sort of trends in terms of organizations or employees and what their expectations are?
There are clearly certain trends that we see. The big one from our perspective is heterogeneity, that our employees, and that's true in pretty much all Western countries, and we're seeing the same thing in some of the Asian countries now as well, are becoming increasingly heterogeneous and are expecting to have the same consumeristic experience when it comes to their job as they would have in their personal life. So that's a very big theme. And that's an advantage. If we can learn how they're different from each other, and we can respond to that, and we can offer more personalized messages and more personalized rewards, it's a very significant opportunity for improvement. So that's the one thing that we see very consistently. Everybody talks about millennials. I'm shocked, actually, every time I look at the data, how true it is, how people are really willing to trade off compensation for work-life balance factors, how a large number of people are valuing training development components very differently than if I look at data from a couple of years ago. So it's certainly that people look at their job and the job offer much more from a total experience point of view is certainly one of the big trends that we see. And the third component is in every single application where we've done this, and we've done hundreds of these applications, we've seen there is significant waste in the system, meaning for whatever reason, there are misalignments with respect to all key factors of the employee experience that we can very easily rebalance, create some cost savings for the company, and then create some value improvements for the employee. Those are sort of the three big trends that we very consistently see.
Yeah, I suppose that's an important point, right? To change some of these things, actually, it doesn't cost a lot of money or it doesn't take a lot of effort. But once you've got that data, you can get that stakeholder support for some of these things. I think it's also quite interesting sometimes when you're in the boardroom, people are really operating off assumptions that they're making, and actually to have a data-driven response to those assumptions can be really helpful around getting the right level of executive and stakeholder support for making these changes. Maybe another question just along that line. Who's typically really engaging with True Choice on this? Does this, we've looked at a lot of the stuff around, what would sit classically in a reward director's role. How many of the sort of, organizations is this really a process led by the reward director versus the CHRO or a CEO really looking to get into the data? What's your experience?
My experience is that most of the initiations coming from the CEO, once they learn that that's possible to generate data, then CHR officers, and then maybe compensation people. But I think CEOs are really the customers of this.
Yeah, I would agree. We're certainly moving up the ladder quite a bit. And the reason is that HR is becoming an increasingly strategic topic, but also that the insights that we generate are much broader than just a very narrow HR topic and have direct implications for the overall longer-term strategic direction of the company. And what we have done with quite a few of these clients is that we haven't just customized the front end, but we also customized the back end. So there is a CEO version of the dashboard. There is an HR broader detailed version of the dashboard. There can be an analyst level or version of the dashboard. So depending on who the users of the insights are, we're also able to customize that part of the output.
Okay.
I think it's just a short story, what we had together with Sev. Once we have done for a large company a project like this, we had a 15-minute slot with the board to have a report. Then we stayed in the room for 1.5 hours because it just engaged them pretty well.
Yeah. Thank you, Robert. Robert, Sev, thank you ever so much for joining us. We are at the top of the hour. We are out of time. Thank you very much for sharing the tool with us. I think it's a really interesting development, and I liked also what you said earlier about this is really that sort of giving next generation employee insight. So thank you ever so much for people joining us. I see attendees dropping off as they go to their next meeting. But Linda, just quickly tell us what's coming up next month.
So next month, our last scheduled meeting, but certainly not the last meeting in the row, as we are already preparing to continue these sessions till the end of at least till the summer break. We will talk about how can you use data that you have in all your systems, and once you connect all the data sources from Workday to your performance management systems to employee service and so on, to what really makes a high-performing team. So not only look at individuals, but also can we detect the hidden messages in the data to what make a team perform really well. And obviously that depends on the industry where you're in or the business where you're in, but we have some interesting insights and experience in that. Along the line, we will also discuss not only about how we can, get to this internal high-performing teams with the current workforce, but also how can we already detect from a candidate in the interview process using certain fancy AI algorithms to what makes someone having a high likelihood or a lower likelihood to be successful in our firm and in the teams within our firm.
Perfect. And we've got a couple of good case studies to share there,
Yep.
so I'm really excited for that one. Great. So look forward to connecting again in a month's time. Thanks again, Robert and Sev, for joining us. And if anyone is interested in more information about the PwC True Choice platform, then please feel free to reach out to us. As normal, we will be emailing you this recording, and please feel free to share with your contacts within your organization, and see you again in February. Thank you.